And welcome back to Subculture on centralcoastradio.com. Well, Lee and I this week were off to Supanova here in Melbourne, and Melbourne turned on some absolutely beautiful weather for Supanova this year, which meant the crowds were out and about, which is actually really good to see because, of course, one Supanova that we went to was affected by the fact that Melbourne looked like it was going into a lockdown that week, and there was very little people out and about. Last year, Supanova was held as normal, but of course, some people still seemed like they wanted to keep away because of the COVID threat. But this year, it seemed like everybody deemed it safe to return, and the result was an absolutely bumper Supanova. And I'm going to kick it off by saying one of the things I loved about this year's Supanova was that there was so much stuff for people to do. Now, Lee and I love to go into the Q&As and listen to the different actors and directors and people from behind the scenes of films talking about films and television shows, but we know that's not for everybody. So one of the things that I really enjoyed about this year's Supanova was there was so much different stuff, and you'll see from some of the photos that we shared socially that there was a lot of stuff that you could go and do. There was Aussie films were being showcased at the festival. There was like lots and lots of shopping, of course, that you could do. There was car displays. There was a Tyrannosaurus Rex VR experience outdoors as well, which was absolutely massive, and people seemed to be really, really enjoying that. But there was also other little things as well. There was workshops with people from the Star Wars fan club showing people how they make their costumes for cosplay. There was a ton of cosplay. There was also a section this year where people could sit down and sample various video games and compete against each other as well, which I think was a great inclusion. We even saw at one point a trivia competition where volunteers from Supanova were taking on super fans in a trivia competition. So there was just a lot to do this year at the festival. Lee, what were your highlights of this year's festival? What did you like, and was there anything that you didn't like about this year's Supanova?
Well, of course, I was excited, as you said, to go to Q&As, as always. And, you know, when you're going into them, you don't know if you're going to get the information you want or how those Q&As are going to go. But I have to say, each person delivered beautifully on their Q&A talk. They provided information. They accepted pretty much any question from the audience. And I feel like there were bigger names there all at once this year. It felt like there was, we were going from line to line, having to reline up to the point of having to miss the end of some talks really to get into the line for the next talk, just because the lines were becoming so massive, because the quality of actors that were there were quite high. So yeah, they were brilliant. Enjoyed the whole experience of Supanova this year in terms of the quality. Of course, the showroom where all the pop culture is being sold is always a lot of fun, and you can treat it a little bit like a museum and look around. But of course, we bought a lot, and some of my favourite stalls were the clothing stalls, because you see a lot of clothing that you don't generally get from your local shopping centre, and it's all in one place, which is awesome. But there was such variety of stores this year that you could go to, anything from of course pops, which we definitely bought some of, to costumes, to cards, to comics, to artwork, and of course there is another whole section of artwork displayed, and with artists there, and some of my favourite stalls from there is Stuart. Yeah. If you know of that stall. Tom Taylor. What else can you recommend?
Jamie Johnson. I always buy some of Jamie's stuff. I think this was the biggest artist gallery that I've seen at Supanova, to be honest. This year, it had its entire own pavilion, and they have used that pavilion before at the Melbourne Showgrounds for the Artist Gallery. But last time it was like only half full. This time it was completely full. There was so many smaller businesses there, and that didn't take anything away from the main hall either. The main hall was absolutely packed with the companies that had gone all out and had like mini stalls there. But yeah, Jamie Johnson is always one of my favorite to buy some stuff off. He does a lot of DC artwork and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and his work is just absolutely amazing. So I think I walked away with 3 prints of his. That was pretty exciting to be able to do. Yeah, I think like probably my biggest weakness of this year's Supernova was possibly, I think, some of the volunteers were kind of overawed with the big crowds. On day one, there was one volunteer in particular. It seemed like she was having a little bit of a tough time with the absolutely massive crowds. And of course, on day one was the day, and we'll talk about that a little bit after we play a song in a little bit. We're going to talk about what some of the celebrities were saying during their Q&As. But I think the first couple of Q&As on day one really overawed some of the staff, and they were running at full tension, especially with the Carl Urban one, which was so crowded that people had to stand at the back and sides. But ultimately for me, it was a great experience at this year's Supernova. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree. Just with some of those experiences, and of one volunteer in particular having a go at some of the general public, which was a little uncalled for, to the point of them being yelled at, being told they're selfish because they weren't shuffling into their chair quick enough, even though they were trying. So I think, you just got to be careful with that stuff, because you can bring a dampener on such a amazing time.
Yeah.
But overall, volunteers were lovely. So it was just a couple of spots there. I think too, with such huge crowds, I understand the having to come out and reline up again so that people who haven't been in one session can get into another. However, logistically, that was a bit of a nightmare, bringing out hundreds and hundreds of people, rather than just saying, whoever's staying in for the next one, move up, and then bringing in those that are lining up. Yeah. I think that could be improved on. And that way, if you're staying for, the whole day of Q&As, you're not reshuffling after every session, trying to resettle yourself. You're actually immersed in the day. So I think that could be improved on as well. And the text on the screen was a little bit of a nightmare. So obviously it's there to help people with hearing impairment, and what a great thing to have there. But it was not translating well, and some of the text that came through was offensive and was nowhere near what was actually being said. I think it would be better maybe to have someone there translating in person. Because some of the lines that came out on the screen, which everyone could see, was not what the actor was saying at all. It sometimes didn't make sense, but some of the words that popped up were quite offensive, and kind of distracted from what the actor was saying, because
the audience were watching it too, because there would be sniggers when some of the mistranslations came up as well. So
but for some of them it wasn't sniggers, it was like, oh my goodness, like how did that get up there? So and that's a fault of the program, not saying that's a fault of the event, because that's out of their hands. But I think just if you're looking for how to improve something,
you can't beat, I think, an actual person doing Auslan translation, because and also sometimes with translation programs, it can not just pick up the wrong word, but it can pick up the wrong meaning of a word as well. Like especially in the English language, where so many of our words are like said the same way but spelt differently as well. I was going to say, one of the other things I really, really enjoyed about this year's too was there seemed to be a lot of stuff for people of different ages, which meant that there were things that like kids could do with their parents as well. It wasn't just limited to parents being able to do stuff. I saw a lot of kids loving the original Batmobile that was there and going and having a look at that. And there was a dance competition with one of the games as well, that like ones that some of the kids were joining in on. So there was lots of stuff for people of all ages, and I think that's what I enjoyed most about this year's Supanova, was there was just so much to do. Like, we were there for 2 full days and never once had weren't doing nothing. We were doing something all the time. So.
No, in fact, we didn't get through it all. There were other things that obviously are on at the same time as, they have to clash because you've got to have options. So that's not a criticism. But there were things that if there was enough time, I would have done even more. And, we brought adult and teenage nephews along with friend, and they had stuff to do all day. They wandered off and did their own thing and had the most amazing time, and, went and paid for the photograph, with actors and signings and all that sort of stuff. And it didn't matter what age you were, there was something for everyone.
Yeah. So I think we're going to go to a song right now, but we're going to come back after that track, and we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the Q&As that we went to, and take a bit of a look at what some of the celebrities and actors said on their panels. But for right now, here's another track on Subculture on the Popcorn Conspiracy. On centralcoastradio.com.